Hey, I see there's a couple people here. That's fun. I don't do live streams a lot, so I might just be staring at my screen and not saying anything to anybody. I might be talking a lot. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. So I have my Xcode 15 here, and let's see if we can convert this little app that I've been working on to work with SwiftData. I actually started this app, I don't know, a week ago or something, just to kind of mess around with in anticipation for WWDC and for things that might be up and coming. So I'll just give that a quick build so we can see what we're working with. It's a pretty basic app. It's a habit tracker, by no means original or creative, I guess, although maybe eventually it will be. Also, if like audio is terrible or anything else is terrible, just ping me, just let me know, shout. Or if it's working well, it'd be good to know that too, because I have no idea if I'm just speaking into the void right now. Alright, so this is the little sample app. Like I said, nothing too crazy, just a little habit tracker. It's got a calendar page that I haven't built yet. Simple adding new habit feature. So I guess this is a good starting point for rebuilding stuff with SwiftData. But before we do, let's go on ahead and I guess maybe look at one of Apple's example apps and pull up some documentation, that kind of stuff, because that would be good. Let's go for the docs. Font a little bit bigger. Let's do font bigger. There we go. Actually, this might be quicker. So let's see where to start. Oh yeah, let's start with that sample app. I've actually downloaded one already yesterday evening to take a quick look. So Apple provides this sample trips app. I haven't run it yet. I just kind of looked at some code, and it's actually pretty cool how they define like these models and they just annotate them with this model macro. And that's all they really do. So that's kind of cool. Core Data kind of figures out, or SwiftData I should say, how to generate like all the Core Data stuff. It's a bit pixelated. Is it pixelated for everybody or just for John Doe? Because it should be outputting like pretty high rates, but I am not an expert, so maybe I messed up some settings. Nice 1080p. Yeah, it should be 1080p. But I'm gonna go ahead and assume it's John's connection. Maybe you can click like the cog thing to get things up. Okay, so yeah, so it seems like simply writing something as a model should be enough to make it a SwiftData model. And I like that they added relationships in the sample app because this tells us a lot about how that works. So a trip can have bucket list items, and it tells us that when this trip is deleted, it should also delete all bucket list items. That's what this cascade does, which we know from Core Data. Like the whole SwiftData thing is very much built on top of Core Data, which is quite obvious based on this kind of stuff. So it's really nice if you already know Core Data. You should be able to get a lot of knowledge on SwiftData, I think. I will not be doing a vision stream. I wish I could. I wish I had a vision device, but I'm going to have to wait just like everybody else. In any event, so we can define relationships like that, so that's cool. No more NS managed, which is also very nice. I like this as well that they included this. So this at transient, what this does is of course not documented, but if it's the same thing as transient would be in Core Data, yeah, it tells SwiftData not to persist the annotated property when managing the owning class. Right? In other words, we can have this color property right here that we assign, read, write, and all that stuff, but it won't be persisted into the underlying database. I guess the macros from Pavel question. I guess the macros just rewrite the SwiftData code to Core Data code, right? That's pretty much what it seems to do. So macros, basically for those that are not familiar with them, they're kind of like a little code snippet. So you can use a macro and it will expand at compile time into a lot more code. So we only write, for example, at relationship, or maybe we can look at a more obvious example in previews, right? So instead of doing like struct content view underscore previews conforms to preview provider, all this boilerplate that we had to write before is now embedded in this macro right here, right? So this macro with the pound in front of it allows us to just write that macro wherever we want. It can be standalone, and at compile time, it's replaced with all of this boilerplate that we would have to repeat every single time. So that's kind of cool. And it works the same way for macros that are used like on the models that we just looked at, right? So in this case, for the at transient, that probably explodes into something that contains a lot of Core Data related code because it's still very obviously Core Data under the hood. Apple said as much. They think it's a good thing. I also think it's a good thing. So yeah, Pavel, it looks like that's exactly what it does, right? These macros rewrite the SwiftData code to Core Data code, allowing us to use it. So yeah, these transient things, we can use those to have non-persistent properties. Let's see, what else do we have here? Bucket list item, right? So that's just something on a bucket list. Let's go ahead and run this app to kind of see what it looks like. And as that builds, look at the trips app. And here we can see a window group, content view, pretty standard. And then we have model container. Okay, so that's new. Right, model container. Oh, lots of documentation. That's nice. Sets the model container in this scene for storing the provided model types, creating a new container if necessary, and also sets a model context. Okay, for that container in this scene's environment. All right. Okay, so it seems like model context is what we would have known as managed object context before. So that probably holds on to all of our model instances. It manages saving, it manages getting new updates from the store and all that kind of stuff. So there's a single model for all windows to store recipe and ingredient. Yeah, that's what this looks like, model container 4. But that's kind of convenient. So this is all the setup that we do. And then SwiftData will sort of know how to make a managed object context or model context and all that stuff for us. So that's quite nice. So we don't have to manage any managed object context kind of stuff at all. And it seems like query, for example, is the way that we're expected to read things. So if we go to content view, let's see what we have in there. Oh, there it is. So we can grab the model context from the environment, which was apparently automatically added when we used the model context view modifier. And we have our query that we can use to go ahead and, yeah, that seems pretty straightforward, right? We fetch trips by start date. It outputs an array of trips, which I guess is similar to the fetch request property wrapper that we had before. We just iterate over trips, okay? Nothing too crazy. What else do we have? Okay, so this is kind of cool. So for deleting, trip object ID equals selection. Interesting that it uses object ID here. I wonder why that is. So the object ID would be core data's unique identifier. Let's actually look at what selecting something does. No trips. Let's add a trip. I'll go to, I don't know, we'll go to Amsterdam. Keep it close to home. There we go. Maybe add like 2 of them. Tester 2. And for that one, we'll go to New York. If I select one, okay. Can't really select one with. Alright. Oh. Invalid number of. Okay, looks like there might be some beta hitches in that sample app. That's fine. In any event, so we have model context delete. So one thing that I read is that it supposedly manages saving automatically, which is kind of cool because there's no calls to save here ever. So that means that at some point, SwiftData will actually have to decide that we're going to save stuff. So let's actually try and see if we can figure out when exactly these saves happen, because I'm curious about that. Like, is it every time? Is it on app close or that kind of stuff? I always forget what the exact arguments are, but luckily I have a website where I write that kind of stuff down. Like my little external brain. Okay, so we have create a SQL debug 1. Let's try that again. So this should actually print like all the SQLite statements that get executed under the hood. So it's going to be quite cool to see exactly what's happening. So the initial stuff is not too interesting, I guess. It's just connecting and all that stuff, which should be more or less the same as it already was. But now we go ahead and add a trip. lots of these warnings. I hope they're gone at some point. Destination, where will we go this time? Let's go to London. So we're done. Let's see. It seems like it actually... Did it just do a save immediately? That's interesting. And that's immediately also using remote change notifications. So that would allow us to use app groups and that kind of stuff. So that's pretty interesting. What else do we have? Default.store. What's that? That's interesting. So I would assume that that's where stuff is stored. It's not a SQLite file. Interesting. So let's see if we can kind of poke in and see what's actually happening there. Oh, where's my terminal at? Looks like my iPad got a little bit stuck. Yeah, let's turn that off and turn it back on again, because I do want to have my external display there. That's cool. Oh, hey, how is SwiftData? It's so far pretty nice, I guess. So the object ID, I'm only now just seeing your messages, by the way. So the object ID is definitely to use for identifiable. I'm just wondering why it would do the deselection based on object ID instead of just setting, or just comparing the two objects. Alright, so let's go ahead and see if we can figure out what's in that store file, because I am interested in that. Does not exist. Is that because of typos? Let's go ahead. Boom. So that exists. Application support. Default.store. Okay, so that's, yeah, that's just a SQLite file. Okay, it just chose a different extension. That's fine. Okay, so what else? What else can we find in here? That's interesting. So saving, it seems, is happening pretty much immediately. What happens when we go home? Nothing. Okay. So I guess it just sort of saves as soon as it can, then? When is this saved? We're not going to go anywhere for this one. Sweet, okay, so it saves quickly. I'm not sure what to make of that, because if it saves stuff super quickly, then yeah, well, you're probably right. Like, it would be a more expensive comparison, although it could also just compare instances, unless you would be able to have multiple contexts here. Then yeah, maybe it makes sense. This does kind of hint at that they want to support multiple contexts at some point. I've tried to use multiple contexts, or like I haven't used it, but I've tried to find any evidence of using multiple context, and I couldn't find anything, but this does seem to suggest that Apple wants to support that at some point. That's cool, because I use multiple managed object contexts a lot, and I was kind of worried that we might not be able to use that anymore, but it seems like it could be a non-issue. So that's nice. All right. I think we've seen enough here. I think now might be a nice time to actually just go on ahead and see if we can start using this in my app. And I know that Apple supposedly has a very cool feature for SwiftData, which is exactly where I would hope it was. So if I go to my model editor, and my model is super tiny, like it only has a few properties, which makes me very happy for now because it means that I can quite easily go ahead and experiment with this. But so in the model editor, I can go to editor and then choose create SwiftData code. It will immediately generate entities, so that's sweet. Let's just go ahead and add them. Do I have I don't have a models folder, so let's just make that. Name's already taken. Oh, I do have a models folder. Cool. So we just do this. So I have my extension. Right, did it not work? Or did it just put the files? I guess that didn't quite work. Alright, let's see if we can put these files somewhere else. Okay, that worked. So I guess I'll just have to move my extensions over here. And I'll also take this and put it over here. That probably won't compile, but that's fine. Delete the old two files and move these over. Okay. Okay, so that's kind of cool because now my thing kind of works. Invalid redeclaration. I'm not redeclaring, but this is probably still my derived data. So I had these files, of course, generated before, or like the classes generated by core data. So I guess that right now in my developer derived data, just go ahead and delete all of that. Clean one more time. Okay, now we get a couple of issues. That's okay. Okay, get that working. Let's see if we can build. If this builds, why is it still saying redeclaration of habit? I only have an extension here. Another extension, so that's definitely not an actual. Oh, hold on, did it? Oh, it didn't delete this. That's kind of inconvenient, right? It doesn't delete your XCData model file. Let me actually just take a note of that. I think I would want it to, once I've generated my SwiftData code, I don't need this anymore. I would at least want it to ask me, like, do you want to keep it or do you want to get rid of it? Because I definitely want to get rid of it. Did that do the trick? Okay, this seems better. I'll want to bump my iOS target because I'm seeing some iOS 17 warnings. There, okay. This looks better. Yeah. This definitely seems to be the point where I should be at this stage, because now I'm in the world where I am using core data but should be using SwiftData, so that's nice. Okay. What would be a good way to start exploring this? Let's start looking at my database, which doesn't do too much. Although I guess we don't need like any of this anymore, which is neat. And so can I, in my view, because I kind of do want to have a separate object where I am able to like do this kind of stuff, like create all my default objects. And I don't necessarily want to have that inside of a SwiftUI view. So I basically want to be able to create that model container or model context, or however they call it, and then inject that into my view somehow. So I do believe that I could, instead of container, I could maybe keep the word container, import SwiftData, and find a model container. And I can make my container an instance of model container 4, and then the models that I want to use. I don't need any specific configurations, I think. No, don't need that. Okay, so I would basically do that for my habit object and for my habit completion object. That should be it. Don't want to handle errors for now, so we'll just do that. Value of model container has no view context, but it does have a main context, and we would have to get that async. So we're going to have to context equals await container dot main context. Do we even really need a context? Okay. And now it's no longer async. Cool. Okay, so since we're no longer having to use perform and wait, I think what I want to have is let all habits, because I want to like delete everything in this function, so all habits would be the query object. I don't want to use SwiftUI stuff. So is there a way to make a query without SwiftUI? Is what I want to know. So we can have fetch descriptors. I think that's going to be the closest thing. Fetch descriptor is that. So all habits request would be fetch descriptor for habit. I don't need a predicate, I don't need to sort, because I just want to delete all of them. So I could say all habits equals context dot fetch with my descriptor. All habits. And then I would do for all habits for each context.delete model. This should work. Model context has no member delete. Pretty sure it does. Cannot convert value type habit. Huh. What's the difference between those two deletes? They look identical, don't they? Yet one works and the other also works. Okay. That was interesting that it didn't work before, but all right. So now we have the delete stuff nailed. I guess we don't need to do any of that. So now I can just go on ahead and make my list of habits. And we can actually make a habit with backing data. Let's see if they have any usage of backing data in that Apple sample code right here. So if I add a trip, did they define that or? Okay, so we have to define our own inits and then we can just use them. That's cool. Let's go ahead and where's my generate member? Why isn't it? Oh well, it's short enough. That works. Raw days, completions. So now we're getting a circular reference complaint. How does Apple deal with that? They had one with a relationship, right? Yeah. Okay. So I guess we shouldn't be passing that kind of stuff to our initializer to avoid that circular reference complaint. And we can get rid of that static create because we're no longer needing this. Cool, so that compiles to habit. Not still circular, why? How does Apple deal with that? We do have this. We have that in it. Oh, that's a good shout, Alexi. I'm gonna go check that out in just a second. Okay, so this looks like it works. So we have to make that other end of the relationship optional. And then it kind of seems to work. But let's go back to that. Deleting all. So context.delete. And then what you're saying is we would be able to do this. Nice. Definitely prefer that. No, it does. It does want to have an argument, it seems. So I guess that doesn't work entirely. So just keep this for now. And then we make that. I'm not going to use label and raw days. So let's do this. Oh, we don't want to use raw days, we want to use the actual days object. So do this. Just got rid of that. Okay, that looks good. And then here, say days, raw days is going to be days dot raw value. Okay, so that works, and we no longer have to save. If we wanted to, we could actually still save this, but autosave is enabled by default, so let's see if Apple says anything in documentation about it. Of course they don't. Maybe here, auto. Okay, so they don't really explain anything about how autosave works. I'm very curious about that, but let's just leave it like this. Okay, so that should allow us to reset defaults. That's pretty cool. And I think I'm just gonna go ahead and comment a couple things out just to sort of see if that first screen in the app works. So we have that one, we have the edit. What did I name that? Edit habit view. I'll go ahead and comment all of this out as well. We don't need this. So we don't need any of that. We would inject a model container system associated. Okay. So our model container is on persistence dot container. So we can do that. That seems to work. We don't want this. How are we back to circular reference? It seems like circular reference is popping up when something is just kind of happening. Like if anything's wrong, it just throws up that weird error, which I don't want. Okay, so our query let's see, how do we use query? We give it a sort and we give it an order. Okay, so the var habits will be of type habit array, and then we tell it sort. Let's just sort it by label. And then order. We'll use forward as well. Habits list. Should we give it a default? No. We should import SwiftData. And completion for today, since this is no longer optional. We don't need to do that. We can just say completions dot first where. Cannot find managed object in scope. Yeah, that's okay. If we have a completion, then self dot model so we'll delete ourselves from the context, otherwise we make a new habit completion that says that we were completed right now. We assign that and we don't save because we trust the system. It's still complaining about a circular reference. So here they have a trip, which does it that way. Okay, so only one of the two should be marked as a relationship. So if I have this, okay, so it looks like if you define a relationship, then, for example, here trip has a bunch of bucket list items, then one of them is going to have the @relationship attribute where we say this is the inverse for this relationship, and I guess that on bucket list item we have our trip. So I guess SwiftData figures out like that it's supposed to be a two-way relationship through only this relationship right here. So one of them defines it, the other doesn't. And I guess that's why we had a circular reference before. So I kind of wish that the generator would have handled that as well. Wish the generator would have handled the circular reference for me. Okay, so that works. Let's see, okay. So completion completed on is no longer optional. So I think we can get we can get rid of probably like a whole bunch of our optional code, because Core Data, of course, handled a lot of things through optionals, and we don't have that anymore, so that's neat. We don't need a managed object context here. We don't have this edit habit view. So in the sheet we'll just put a text that displays habit dot label. Or something like that. And now this reset defaults became async. Cannot find habit in scope. Why not? Oh, probably because this is defined just anywhere. Hello world. And this is something I can throw. Okay. Could this be it? Could this be everything we have to do? So nothing shows up that's expected. Okay, so that doesn't quite work. Because hitting that defaults button should trigger this code right here. Which it does, so that's nice. What happens if we just throw a save in there? I guess we'll force unwrap it because I want to see if it actually fails or something like that. It's not failing. context dot inserted objects array. This should get us the new objects that we just added. So it's empty. Okay, so we apparently have to associate these habits that we create with a context somehow. So let's go on ahead and go back to Apple's thing and see if we overlooked something. So when they add a trip, did I do anything? Ah, okay, so they insert. Okay, so you have to insert all of your objects into the model context. So now if you use something like this, let habits equals, and then habits for each context insert. We can insert a batch, but I don't want it to be a dictionary. Okay, so we'll just use this for each approach for now. Okay, so that works, and repeatedly clicking will do that, so that's neat. Let's see what happens if I do this. So that works, and now I click again. That's good. And what happens if I do this, and now rerun the app? So I never saved anything, so I wonder if, oh look, all 4 of them are selected, so that's cool. That does make me wonder, like, how eager is SwiftData to keep on saving stuff? Because that is not always cheap to be saving often, so maybe that's something that would be a problem in the long run, but for something simple as this, it's completely fine. Okay, so we have that now. Let's add back this new habit view. And then we've successfully migrated this project already. So that's quite impressive, I must say. I like what they're doing here. Okay, so we don't need this file. So what I used to do in this view is I used to create a new instance of my managed object in a child context, because that would allow me to manipulate the managed object directly into child context, and then if somebody did not want to persist their changes, I would just discard the object and the context, and the changes would be gone. If I would save into the view context, and then save to view context into the persistent store. Now, based on what I'm seeing in Apple's SwiftData headers, there's no way for a model context to have its parent assigned, which is something that we can do on managed object context. It looks like the initializer is available to us for a model context, but we can't really say if it should be a child of anything or anything like that. So I think we only have the main context, which forces us to be working on the main actor, right? So we can only access a main context on the main actor. And there's no, like, you know how NS persistent container has this perform in the background or something like that? It looks like we don't have anything like that available to us here. So that's kind of a shame. Model configuration itself also doesn't really give us much other than whether it's in memory or not, whether it's CloudKit or shared app container. And we can give it our own URL, but no no configurations for this should be in the background or that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I don't know what Apple envisioned here. I've found a feedback for this because I would like to be able to do this, but sadly it's not a thing. This is quite interesting, by the way, right? So this is sort of where these macros come in, because we can call something a model and everything will work magically. And what Apple does behind the scenes to make sure that all of this is threat safe, to make sure that all of this works, is that Apple actually uses their own actor. So in this case, a model actor, they call it, that leverages a custom executor to make sure that we are always on the correct queue for interacting with our model objects. Right? So even if we would go to the background, we would still be interacting with our model instances on the, well, probably main thread, right? Because that's where our view context lives, if we think of this from a core data kind of perspective. But of course it could be anything, right? If Apple has some private queue that's not the main actor, then that's fine as well, or the main thread, that's fine. But so this is why all of this works. So this is really cool with this custom executor, this unowned executor that they have here. That's really the power of all of this. I see Prathamesh asks, what did I miss? You missed a bunch. We actually managed to refactor my my overview of my sample app to be working with SwiftData, right? So this view right here is entirely SwiftData driven right now. It persists data. I can relaunch the app, and then things works. I can reset stuff back to defaults, recompile, and it still works and all that. So you missed the big stuff. You missed all of it, kind of, but not all of it, because we're gonna build a view that we can use to add new habits that we want to track. And I was just going over how I used to use child contexts for this, because that was quite convenient, but that doesn't exist. And then I stumbled upon this model actor, and I realized that, okay, so they're using custom executors to make sure that we are always on the correct queue. But so that also makes it look like at this stage, there's no way for us to inject a different actor that would put us on like a background queue or whatever. So there's only a single model actor in existence right now, which makes me think that they haven't added support for background queues or for child contexts just yet. But if that's something that you would like to have in your apps, like I have in mine, definitely file feedback for that, because I do believe that it's very nice to have that kind of stuff. In any event, this does mean that we can get rid of my edit model factory. So we're going to go ahead and move that to the trash where it belongs now. And we'll go ahead and make this edit habit view. And we'll go ahead and make that work. So given that our habit is now a model, and I think that marking something as a model would also mark it as observable. It's just sort of a wild assumption that I have. Is there anything here that might back this up? Persistent model. Okay, so it does do something with an observation register, which I know is part of the observable macro. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that this does in fact somehow leverage the observable macro under the hood. So that's cool. Okay, so we should be able to just say in this edit habit view that what'll be a nice way to do this? Because we don't really want to observe this habit, I don't think, because we don't have support for child contexts. Do we care if this is a new habit or not? I think we do. We no longer care about habit. I don't think we care about this on safe anymore either. Yeah, we don't. We actually didn't care about that in the first place. So now what we'll do is we'll say state var label should be a string state var days, which will be habit.days to flag which days we want to repeat this. And I am actually going to optionally insert a habit. I'm going to get rid of this. So if I initialize this without a habit, I will know that we're dealing with a new habit. And if we do insert a habit here, we'll know that we're not dealing with something new. So we know that we're dealing with something that exists. Then what we'll do is in the onAppear for my view, actually fix this while I'm looking at it. So if habit is nil, adding a new one, otherwise we're editing one. And in the onAppear for this, I will just go on ahead and say self.label will be habit.label or empty. We'll just do this nicer part, let habit else return. So we don't deal with optionals here. Label will be habit, label days will be, or selected days will be habit.days. So we'll have this, and also have to do something with this. So on save, what we'll do is if let habit, then we'll say habit.label equals label habit.days equals selected days, else let habit equals a new habit with label of label and days set to selected days. And then we'll need to grab the model context from our environment, and we're going to go ahead and model context insert our new habit. So I think that should work just fine. Okay, cannot find $habit in scope. That's good. That's expected. So this works, this works, this works. Okay. Okay, so here if selected days.contains, so we're no longer directly manipulating the habit. And instead we are dealing with our selected days, so that's good. And then the name will be bound to $label. Instance method with default. We don't need that because we don't have optionals, which is very nice. That built. And let's see if this works. Oh, how about we actually go over here to the habits lists and present our edit habit view, and we pass it no arguments. We're not editing anything that exists. So we'll go ahead. So what did I mess up? I cannot type a name for this. Or is that just... This might actually be the iOS 17 simulator being a little bit out of whack. Okay, so that seems to work okay. We saved this. It added it. Perfect. And so it is Tuesday today. So I'm going to make a habit that doesn't include Tuesday to see if it doesn't show up, because that's what I want right now. Because I only want to see the habits that I have to do today. So that looks good. So it's not showing. If I add one, that should show on Tuesday. There it is. This is kind of cool. I really just wish that I would have been able to use like a child object here, or like some temporary object. But it's kind of nice that I can just do this. I don't need any of this stuff over here. And cannot find database in scope. What was I doing with my database? Oh, for setting defaults, okay. I will keep that. Cannot find $habit in scope. That's just Xcode being a little bit weird. Okay, so first impression, this is pretty cool. Reset back to my defaults. I mean, it is somewhat limited in terms of what I've created, but that's just my fault. So it doesn't say if I dismiss, that's good. So how about we add a long press gesture to see if we can implement like editing functionality or something. So we have this button. Can we do long press on a button? Does that work? Or does that trigger the button first? Okay, so it looks like we cannot do it here. What if we do it there? Okay, not a problem. We can just do this. Simultaneous gesture. Do we need that? Context menu? Maybe? I haven't used that, I think, much, at least. Context. Menu items. Okay. Oh wait, I was totally in the wrong file. That doesn't help when you're trying to test something, because I'm supposed to be in my habits list. Where I use a tap gesture, so let's give that one more go. That's better. Okay, so we can actually say selected habit equals this habit is editing habit equals true. And then in my sheet, I'll actually say that my habit is going to be selected habit. Then sheet has an onDismiss thing that you can use, right? Yeah. Because when we dismiss the sheet, I will have to reset my selected habit. To be nil. Yeah, swipe action could be nice too. I'm actually considering doing swipe actions eventually to like also do deletion and all that. Okay. So this seems to work okay. Except for that first one where it showed up empty for some reason. I wonder why that was. Is it always empty like the first time? Makes me wonder if there's like some kind of race condition. So write that out. Yes, okay. So it is nil first time. Interesting. Is it a race condition situation or? Actually, you know what we could do? I think we can actually just nah. Never mind. Let's try this. Still nil first time. It's interesting because after this first miss, it always picks the correct one. Why don't we remove a couple days and we save? That totally works. If I do this, that seems to be fine. I wonder why it's initially giving me that nil. That worked. So I was thinking about using sheet Prathamesh, but then I remembered that if I add a new habit, I don't have a habit to associate with that property. So I would have to have two sheets, which could work. One for like is adding a new habit, and the other for like editing an existing one. But I didn't quite like the idea of that, so I wanted to see if I can make it work in this way. Although we could also use an enum, which I think if this is weird. So set habit to optional, presenting with nil. Okay, so that's annoying. What we can actually do is do an enum of habit sheet action. We'll have a case add new. I'll do case edit, and edit will have a non-optional habit. And then we'll do a state var of habit sheet action of optional habit sheet action. I actually might like this better. I think it's a good idea that you had there. So on long press, we'll make habit sheet action dot edit my habit is presented. We'll get an item of dollar habit sheet action. We no longer need the on dismiss in that case, and what I'll have to do is switch. Where did I put my? There. Habit sheet action equals dot add new. And switch habit sheet action. For add new, I will get an edit habit view with nothing, and for edit, I will do an edit habit view with a habit. I mean, it's a bit of a hassle to reuse that view, but it was pretty easy in core data because you could like have your child object, so you could always pass it a habit object, and it would just interact with that and work with it. But this seems to work okay as well, if this eventually builds. Expects one argument. Oh yeah. Have to switch over the item. And habit sheet action must be identifiable. Can do. I really have to do something here. Let's see. This will be fun. Switch over self. There we go. Now everything has a unique ID. So that works. It persists, also good. We add a new one. That works. We can edit this one. Yep. Mark it complete. We can relaunch the app. Sweet. I kind of like that magic where we never really save stuff, but somehow it works. That's quite cool. All right, I think I'm gonna call this a successful experiment and go for some lunch. Is there anything anybody wanted to take a look at before we wrap up, or shall we just call this a good morning and wait for videos to drop later on? I'm going to take that as everybody's happy with this hour of SwiftData. Cool. Well, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll meet again. Have a great week for DubDub. Bye-bye.